Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan says that former Eskom CEO André is no whistleblower, but instead suffers from a messiah complex. That's Gordhan today, who appeared before the Standing Committee of Public Accounts, where he was grilled about steps that he took when Ruyter raised corruption allegations at the entity. But Gordhan maintains that the claims made by the former CEO during a TV interview were nothing new.
However, this egotistical trip that he's on at the moment is not serving him or the country in any positive way, and any notion that he has that he is this messianic or heroic figure that is going to, on the one hand, condemn all of us, but on the other hand, be the savior, but also take rather old-fashioned ideological positions in relation to both my organization but others as well, is a misplaced area of focus on his part. And the breaking of his firm commitment when he signed the contract of employment, as I pointed out earlier, is one that no other private sector CEO does, and it's the private sector that he comes from. So that's a point that the public and the business sector in particular should actually take note of. His expressions about corruption are nothing new. We've all said it before his time, during his time, and we'll say it after his time, which is a point I tried to illustrate earlier on. It's nothing new there. What is new and interesting, and the South African public would be interested in this, was he recording every conversation that he had with everybody? Was he more interested in writing a book that would mask his legacy as far as performance at Eskom is concerned? And is that what this book is about? Because if the message is there's corruption at Eskom, we've all heard it before.
Let's take the story further now and speak to the Portfolio Committee Chairperson for Minerals and Energy, Sahlulele Luzipo, on the appearance today by the Minister for Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, before the Standing Committee on Public Accounts in Parliament. A very good evening to you, sir. Grateful for your time. So you're part of a separate committee, but I wonder what you make of the appearance by the Minister today and how he's responded to questions on the allegations made by the former CEO, because all of this is linked somehow, is it not, to your Portfolio Committee's work as well?
Well, let me greet you, Brototo, and the viewership. The first thing I think we must concede to is that South Africa currently is busy and desperately looking to find solutions. And the sooner we take our regrettable past event, the better, and looking forward to find solutions. But I think from a point of view of what we have been saying, as the Portfolio Committee on Mineral Resources and Energy, respectfully of the primary terrain of public enterprise, we have always argued that our responsibility as the Portfolio Committee on Mineral Resources and Energy is to hold our executive accountable for executive actions, specifically in this case that relate to the issue of electricity policy, including matters that relate to giving in on what one would call augmented alternative sources of energy. And I think for me, what is important to read out of this exercise is the fact that what we have been arguing all the time when that CEO was still at Eskom was that the crisis at Eskom has very little to do with the issue of energy or electricity policy. It had more to do with what we'll call turnaround, or the need to have a comprehensive turnaround strategy to address Eskom as the institution that is primarily responsible for baseload electricity. And in this case, I think we have been vindicated to say that if there is only one thing that we have done is what one will argue very strongly, that we have got 3 wasted years that we thought that we were the CEO responsible for Eskom, including addresses maintenance-related issues that were a problem of continuous breakdowns. And with this now, it has been proven that that CEO had very little to do with addressing those imminent challenges that were faced by Eskom, especially with relating to the issues that relates to maintenance, turnaround plans, as well as employee motivational aspect. I have not seen anything that in the past report that we've received that says the CEO what he was doing at Eskom, except two things that I think he has passed with exemption. The first one is to ensure that it becomes an investigating officer when there were institutions that I think they've done quite well, especially the SIU. Most of the cases, by the way, that is in front of the court, they've got nothing to do with the CEO, former CEO. Most of the things that are in front of the courts, including the return of and the writing off of irregular contracts, the court rulings that relate to irregular contracts that people have to pay back, the monies that they owe, including former employees of Eskom. They've got more to do with what one would argue and say is your day-to-day enforcement agency.
Okay.
So he has passed with distinction the question of investigation that were not related to what Eskom was confronted with. The second thing is that there has been a very good successful...
If I may come in there in the interest of time, it's all good and well to be critical of Ruyter now, as Minister Gordhan was, but a year ago, 6 months ago, when Ruyter was being criticized, it was the very same minister who gave him his public backing. So why was there backing from that level for a man who, by the minister's assessment, was underwhelming in the role?
Well, I think it's for the minister to answer that one. I think what we can do is that the minister...
Do you not think it's hypocritical for the minister to have backed him as recently as 6-8 months ago and then only to slam him now that we are talking about corruption and Ruyter's claim that he told him something about what had gone on?
Look, I think that question, it will be unfair to ask it to somebody else. The point is, we have always argued from the way we're standing that the problems of Eskom have got very little to do with issues of policy. And I think that's the point that must now be vindicated. The issue is that had we been able to establish from the onset what the CEO was supposed to be done, I can argue strongly now that we are almost 3 years behind. That is why we are facing this crisis now, a crisis that we identify those problems and weaknesses, like the Minister of Electricity has identified them. We would have been to attend to them within 2 years or a year ago, and we wouldn't be facing the situation where we are. That is why I said the sooner we forget the regrettable past and beginning now to say, how do we assist in ensuring that we find immediate solution on a problem that we could have been attended to it almost 3 years ago becomes the better. I can't sit here and say somebody who would have believed, by the way, I think we must also be fair and say, I can believe of what you say, but I may realize down the line that what you have been feeding me with information is absolutely an incorrect and inaccurate information. And I think that is the point for me that I understand the minister to be saying that what we have been receiving was, in fact, we're being deceived by this person on what is actually doing and performing it.
Well, we give you only the truth on news at Prime. Let me ask you then about moving forward, because you say that's what needs to happen. Ultimately, if Eskom is being looted, some of that money should be going towards taking the country in a better direction, right, in terms of energy security. But as things stand tonight, there's still no one willing to give us actual names of senior political people or a political bigwig who was involved in the corruption. There's now the issue of this privately funded investigation report, which Nkululeko Hlengwa, the chairperson of SCOPA today, said, to his mind, in fact, raises a national security threat because we had people who were possibly not vetted, basically dealing with sensitive information as relates to the country's energy security and the power utility itself. Would you agree with that assessment?
Look, I think for me, remember, I think we must also allow the SCOPA chairperson and SCOPA itself to deal with those issues. Obviously, it's about public expenditure. For me, there are three critical things that remains important. The first thing is that in acknowledging now the level of backlog in terms of addressing those weaknesses at Eskom, to what extent now can we be able to allocate or plug in resources where they are required and necessary in need in order to address what we should have been able to address 3 years ago. And I think that is the immediate thing. And I hope what the Minister of Electricity has identified in terms of the structural challenges as far as maintenance is concerned is the first thing that we must attend to. The second thing, I think the more we begin to say our law enforcement agencies, for an example, the work that has been done by the SIU, you will recall recently there's been a case of millions of rands that of a contract that was granted dubiously to a service provider, which included a high senior official of Eskom. The SIU has done its proper investigation. The courts have made a ruling that the person is responsible, the former employee is responsible, and therefore is required to make particular payment and serve particular years in jail. I think we must encourage the law enforcement agents to deal with this thing. I'm always saying that I'm worried about the fact that people think that we can hide behind the corruption at Eskom. There is no doubt that there has been inherent corruption at Eskom. But when it comes to accounting officers, they need to prove even themselves what role they have been played to cut down on that. The third point for me that is critical is that once we are doing that exercise of addressing the question of the backlog as far as electricity availability factor, we need now to say to what extent, in order to address future challenges that we may have as far as electricity is concerned, how do we begin to bring in alternative sources of energy in order to augment the base load? But Eskom is primarily responsible for the base load challenges, right, including those things, a proper maintenance and comprehensive plan.
Mr. Sahlulele Luzipo, Chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Minerals and Energy, good to have your thoughts, sir, today on the appearance of the Public Enterprises Minister before Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts.